Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's demo of scaling testing with Cypress and Perfecto. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. First, at the bottom of your audience console, you'll find a number of widgets for questions and additional resources. When you have questions for the presenter during the presentation, click on the Q&A widget and submit your question. We will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the demo, and if we run out of time, we'll get back to you via email. Second, if you need any tech support during the presentation, please use the help option. Third and finally, a copy of today's slide deck is available in the resources section at the bottom of your screen. We will also email you a link to the recording of this demo within the next few hours. With that, I will introduce our presenter for today's demo, Johnny Lamb, Head of Global Sales Engineering here at Perfecto by Perforce. Johnny, thank you for joining us on today's presentation.
Hey, Shelby, thank you. Thanks for having me on the webinar. All right, so today we have a really interesting topic. We're going to go through Perfecto and Cypress and what are the problems that we're trying to solve here at Perfecto. But before we jump into that, I just want you guys to know who I am. So I've been with Perforce Perfecto for over 5 years. I run the sales engineering organization at Perforce Perfecto and TestGraph. So today what we're going to talk about is really some of the key challenge. If you're listening to the webinar, this would be very applicable if you have Cypress running and you're at a point where you want to start scaling it up. So you're at the point where you have some assets, you run them locally, you run them as part of your cycle, and you're at the point where you're looking for something to get you faster feedback and better reporting. And the conversation typically starts by looking at the pipeline. So you see on this slide over here, we've outlined a very high level, what a typical pipeline looks like for any software shop. So on the far left, your developers in a local environment, you would have your code running, you would run your Cypress tests locally, and you test them locally before committing and doing pull requests in committing the code as part of the cycle. So once that's committed, you'll see that the second icon over there is really in the pipeline, like what's happening in the pipeline. So your deployments, your tests, and also just building it out and making sure it's stable. And if you navigate towards this, you also see there's other events which require a quality gate as well. So your QA environment, your UAT environment, and also in production as well. The problem that we see in the market is a lot of folks that are using Cypress, they're looking at a solution of scaling this out so that as part of the pipeline in cycle, they can have faster feedback loop. And the challenge that we see is really there aren't that many options at the moment available, which allows you to easily scale it out and at the same time get faster feedback back to your development team. So what we try to do is at Perfecto is really, we looked at this. This is the common theme and feedback that we're getting from our customers. And they're asking us, what can Perfecto do in order to help solve this problem? Now, along with that, we see that these are some of the themes that are bubbling up with all the folks that we're talking to, and really falls into 3 buckets. Now, first of all, one of the key requirements that we see from a lot of teams is we're talking to a lot of teams with strong enterprise requirement. So they're looking for a solution where, first of all, it has to be secure. Now, second of all, it has to have the right level of access to these internal and lower environments. And on top of that, the other bucket that we see a lot of folks are pressing for faster feedback is really they're looking to do this because they want to improve their development velocity. And this is typically driven by a few things, such as, for example, let's say their competitors are coming up with new products, new features, new functionality quicker than them, and they need a method to get more done within the same sprint cycle. All right, so there is an urgency for them to increase their velocity and to have a lot more of these features developed within that time frame. You know, the last of all, another common theme that we're hearing is a lot of time they don't really have time to develop and maintain their own infrastructure, the framework, and everything associated with building up a Cypress grid in-house. Right? Most folks that we're talking to, they're developers, they're already swamped. So if they want to scale this out, the option of doing like as a DIY lab involves too many resources. It takes away time from their core competence, takes away time from development, and another thing for them to maintain on an ongoing basis. And if you see what we really do at Perfecto is we really try to solve that problem where if you have all of these problems and you have an urgency to go faster, this is where Perfecto comes in, and this is where Perfecto fits really well. So what exactly are we trying to solve, and what exactly is our offering? All right, so 4 of the key things that Perfecto does really well is, first of all, scalability. All teams are asking to run things a lot faster, so we're talking about how do we scale a test that takes, let's say a test suite, it takes half an hour, and how do we cut that down to, let's say, 5 minutes? Right? And we do so by providing a very scalable lab for you with a minimal code change in your existing Cypress environment. Now, second of all, the other aspect of this is if you're trying to maintain your DIY lab, once in a while you have to update your browser versions to stay current with what your customers are using. So the prospect and the maintenance, or the ongoing maintenance of maintaining those browsers, those OS versions, and keeping them up to date becomes yet another maintenance item that's taking time away from your developers. Right? Reporting is one thing where once you have a lot of tests up and running, this is something that you will quickly have to solve. And again, a lot of teams, when they look at what's available for, in this case, a JavaScript, TypeScript, and using, for example, Cucumber type of a framework, they're running into a lot of issues of having a good open source reporting and analytics platform that you can output all the results into and quickly drill down into what are the tests doing, why they're failing, and doing that ongoing debug and triage cycle. All right, and last of all, we talked about enterprise security. When we developed the solution, we keep this in mind. So anything that the Perfecto is working on, in this case with our Cypress SDK, this is top of mind. We have to make sure that our solution not only functionally works, performs really well, but it also has to be really secure and adhere to all these enterprise standards. So we'll take a deeper look into these 4 buckets. First thing, scalability. Like on the left is a lot of times of what we're dealing with right now. So you could have your Cypress up and running, and you're running things really sequentially on your local computer. Now, by doing that, what we do see is that because it's sequential, and you have to wait for one test to complete before starting on the next one, it typically takes a bit of time to go through your test suite, especially if you have quite a sizable test suite already built out. Now, the challenge is to scale this out and really to have this running in your pipeline. 30 minutes or 35 minutes is really not good enough, because by the time you have feedback after half an hour, your chances are, let's say your pipeline is already stale, right? Other folks have already checked in code, and chances are you're moving on to the next item rather than keeping what you're developing kind of fresh on your memory. So with Perfecto, really it's a simple SDK we're providing. Now there's a very minimal code change that is required in your existing Cypress framework. And by adding these code changes, adding this SDK, what you're able to do is we're able to define and run all of your test cases in parallel at the same time. Folks that have, for example, if you are a Perfecto customer and let's say you are using a Perfecto web product, essentially what you can do is you can leverage the full capability and the full capacity of all of your web license and run everything in parallel at the same time. And what this really does for you is imagine running one sequentially to comparing running on Perfecto, running 50, 100, 200, 300 in parallel. Now this will give you a much faster feedback cycle. And what this really does for you is your developers no longer have to wait around in order to get the feedback that they need. And a part of this is really, we see this as solving a primary problem in the pipeline. And that's really when you have multiple developers and they're checking in code and they're doing pull requests at different times during the day. And by having this tight 5-minute feedback window, this allows them to go fast without having worried about slowing each other down. Now, the second thing that we solve is really the browser maintenance. And we see this quite often. We know that, for example, Chrome, they release at least a build a month. Other browsers such as Firefox, Edge, and anything that Cypress support, those will also be supported as part of Perfecto's platform. And again, compared to a DIY lab where you have to spend time maintaining each one of these combinations and updating them as new versions become available. Now, this is consumed as a service when you're using Perfecto. Like all the web VM capability that you already have with Perfecto, these will all be available, and you can utilize these with a Cypress SDK. Now, first of all, once you have a lot of tests running, you're scaling it out and you're running things in parallel, chances are you're going to get a lot of execution report. And for a lot of teams that we're talking to, we're talking about thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands execution on a monthly basis. So that's a lot of reports, and that's a lot of test execution that you have to go over. And for teams that are trying to scale and for teams that are in an enterprise setting, chances are you're working with a lot of other colleagues, a lot of other developers, sometimes in the same squad, sometimes in, let's say, multiple squads and multiple teams. So what this does for you is really one of the challenges that you might run into is reporting and analytics. How do you make sense of all that data? And how do you also compare from one branch to another branch, or from, let's say, one build to another build, whether or not those tests are stable? And how do you visualize a trend? Like, is it trending right, or is everything passing? And if they're failing, like, how quickly can I drill down into each one of those test cases to figure out what happened? And at Perfecto, you'll see that we have spent a lot of time. So as part of that SDK, any executions on Perfecto will be accompanied by one of these execution report. And we'll dive into detail as we go through the demo, and we'll showcase exactly like what are the different views and what are some of the test artifacts you would get. All right, last but not least, really to complete our solution and to make the solution applicable for all of our customers, we spend a lot of time ensuring that our solution, or SDK, adheres to enterprise security, and we're able to access those internal environments. So anything, if you have been using Perfecto, like anything that is applicable to Perfecto with Selenium, Perfecto with Espresso, XCUI, Perfecto manual testing, like any of these frameworks that you're using, or any of these setups that you have with Perfecto, these will all be applicable with Perfecto and Cypress. Cypress, our SDK, is running as a microservice on top of our lab. So if you have, let's say, a VPN already set up in Perfecto, Cypress will leverage through the web VMs the same VPN to access your internal environment. If you're using Perfecto Connect, the same Connect will also be available with Cypress. And again, in terms of security, we take it very, very seriously. And so we're able to serve most, if not all, of the, let's say, Fortune 500 companies, including companies that have a strong requirement in terms of security. So in the finance, the banking industry, the insurance industry, and all these different industries where security is very, very important. Perfecto is able to adhere to these standards and keep your security team happy in consuming our solution. All right, without further ado, we're going to jump into a live demo, and we're going to showcase Perfecto with the Cypress SDK so that we can have a hands-on feel for exactly what is our offering and how do we leverage the Cypress at scale on the Perfecto platform. All right, so well, first off, we'll land in our Perfecto landing page. And what you're seeing right now is a dedicated private environment, or demo environment per se. And you're seeing that there's quite a few different modules. So for folks that are seeing Perfecto for the first time, I'll quickly go over what are some of the components. So what we do, what our bread and butter really is we're providing infrastructure for testing and development in the cloud. And these includes quite a few things. including things such as, let's say, real mobile devices in the cloud in 11 different data centers, and also virtual devices in the cloud for multiple different combinations. Last but not least, we also have our solution, and when you click into a wizard, you see that we also provide you various desktop browser platforms in the cloud as well, including Windows, including Mac, and including 3,000 different combinations of these. OS resolution, the version, and also which browser we're using. So with the lab, what we're able to do is we have our infrastructure in here, we have our devices, we have our browsers, but with Cypress, what we're really after is how do we leverage these web browsers along with our existing Cypress framework. Now, with the SDK, it's really straightforward. I'm going to quickly jump over to, in this case, my Windows IDE environment, so my Visual Studio Code environment. And you'll see here, I have a very basic skeleton of a vanilla Cypress project, right? So this includes me just going into a Cypress, doing npm download, and just setting up a Cypress for the first time. Now, we made a few changes to the skeleton in order to incorporate some of the config files required for the SDK. But once you've gone through the steps of installing the Perfecto SDK, making some changes to your skeleton of the project, what you would end up with is, here are the specs. And also, the most important thing in here is really the perfecto-config.json file. Now, when we open it up, the JSON file, what this does is it's a file which dictates what are the setups and what are the capabilities you want to leverage from Perfecto. Now, this includes a few things. The first section up here includes which cloud are you running this on? And this will be, in this case, our demo dedicated private cloud environment. Your security token, this will authenticate who you are and give you access to the cloud. The next section is, this is where the magic happens. This is where we'll pass along various web browsers and combinations of web browsers and make them available so that you can scale this out and run on multiple browsers in parallel. Now, in this case, we can leverage one of our 3,000 different combinations. So the first section in here, what we're doing is we're running this on Windows 10, we're running it on Chrome, or we're running it on browser version 89, and under this resolution in our US East data center. Now, the last thing in here on line 15, which is also important, is you can determine and you can define the number of platforms to run this on. So, for example, if you have, let's say, 100 tests, you can say, I want to run this on 100 browsers in parallel. So that each one of these tests will be hitting a different browser. All right, so that will allow you to get the faster feedback loop compared to running them one sequentially, one after another. You can also define multiple platform types. In this case, you see that I have Chrome running, but I also have Firefox running at the same time. So this over here, what this is telling me is that I want to run it on 2 platforms, and I want to run it on 5 concurrent capacity within each platform. Scrolling down a little bit, here are also additional code snippet, which allows you to tag your tests. So you can run this as part of the reporting and reporting back into a pipeline. So under line 43 and the section underneath this, here's where you can pass along system variables, environment variables to tie this with your existing CI/CD pipeline. Now, in this case, I've highlighted a few things. So let's say I'm running this as part of Jenkins. What I can do is I can pass along the Jenkins job name, the build number, and applicable branch. There are additional fields, so you can also tag along which project it's running it on, the version, and any other custom fields you can pass along to our reporting SDK as well. Now, last but not least, once you have all of this defined, make sure you're pointing towards the right spec files, or in this case, your test files. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm doing a wildcard. So this syntax here is telling me I'm going to pick up on all of the JS files that is available under integration and under examples. And by defining this, what we're doing is we're running a simple command. So in here, in my terminal, you see that I'm running this command, which points towards a config file and points towards, in this case, I'm running it a zip file. So it's doing a few things, and there's a few different flows. In this case, I have already pre-uploaded this zip file. I've zipped up the framework. I've uploaded to Perfecto repository and simply executing the config file and running this directly on our cloud. So what you should see is when things are up and running, when we flip back over to the Perfecto view, we can navigate from manual testing to test analysis mode. And then we hover over to the live stream view. You'll see in a second that we're bringing up different VMs and we're pre-populating the right set of condition, including your various combinations of Chrome and your various combinations of Firefox in this instance. So this is a live view, and this is, you see it flashing. What this is doing, it's preparing, in this case, 10 VMs in parallel. All right, so once they're all pre-populated, we have our Cypress SDK and our Cypress repository and framework uploaded. It's going to start kicking off these Cypress execution in parallel at the same time. And by doing so, we can achieve a much faster execution turnaround time. Instead of sequentially, when we run them, let's say 10 in parallel, we'll cut the feedback cycle back by a factor of 10x. And if you have, let's say, more concurrent capacity, you can imagine the scalability and the feedback loop that you can obtain by having a lot more parallel capacity on demand as you need it. So we'll give it a second, but as we're running these tests, let's quickly flip over to what are some of the report Cypress. All right, so we're on the dashboard, and this is what we call our CI dashboard view. So what this view does really well, this allows us to pass along any CI/CD information into our Digital Zoom reporting dashboard. So what you're seeing in here is for each one of these roles, these are individual jobs that I have from, it could be from one CI server, let's say Jenkins, or it could be from multiple CI servers. So what this gives you is really the flexibility of mixing and matching different CI servers, because we know that especially in an enterprise setting, different teams will have their different tool stack. We want to be agnostic to that, and we want to give them the power to pick and choose the technology they're using. And most importantly, what this does for you is all the results from all these different technology stack are outputted in a single dashboard. So you can compare and contrast, let's say, your Cypress test, let's say there are sanity tests running on Cypress, compared to, let's say, full end-to-end Selenium tests, or maybe, let's say, a mobile test using Espresso or XAUI. Now, this will give you that capability within the same dashboard to visualize everything side by side. Now, you can further drill into the details. So if you want to get more granular, you can also visualize as a branch by job view. So what this does for you is if you're, let's say, running the same test over multiple branch, you can compare local feature branches, development branches, but you can see how does your regression test, or in this case, your smoke test, look like under multiple branches and different, let's say, environment conditions. Another very handy view for you to compare side by side and really give their developers the feedback that they need. If they have, let's say, a local code change they want to compare to what's running on master, that's something that they can run a sync test on and compare side by side whether or not that has introduced any issues. Each one of these bars, what's really powerful about these is you can also drill down into the detail of exactly what they're doing. All right, so in this case, as our tests are executing, we can hit the refresh button over here, and it's going to bring up quickly like what's happening live and what's happening on the cloud at the same time. All right, so when we go back to our live stream view, you see that these tests are starting to run. All right, so this is showing you, in that case, a quickly flash by because these tests are really, really quick. And now you've seen that it actually happened really quickly, so that the Cypress execution are all done and complete. Now, when we flip back to the CI dashboard view, we should see in a moment the Perfecto Cypress end-to-end execution, which I kicked off locally. And if I flip over, in this case, it's back to our Visual Studio Code. You see in the terminal, this will show me how many tests are passing, how many tests are failing, along with this link over here, all right, which gives me the execution report for that suite of tests that I've executed. We'll give it a second. We'll give it a second for the test suite to compile and load and to generate the results. But what you will get out of this is quite a few things. So for each one of the tests that you have, it's going to give you the screenshot, but it's also going to give you a full recording of it. So if you do find any issue, you can share the screenshots, you can share the recording, you can share the logs as well directly to your developers. So that really cuts that back and forth triage cycle down by quite a bit by having these additional artifacts. In addition, as you're going through these sort of tests, you can also go back to the previous historic view as well. So if you have the same test running, let's say from one build or another, you can compare side by side. How does your latest and greatest test compare to previous execution as well? So that will give you a lot more visibility and to narrow down what might really be the problem if you have any failed tests. Now, along with that, there's also quite a few different views which are really powerful. So sometimes you want to visualize exactly what's happening. You can hover over to this heat map view. Now, what this does for you, a dashboard view where you can slice and dice the data as you need. So in this case, what I can do is I can say, all right, the last 7 days. All right, the last 7 days, I want to filter and I want to show all the tests that I've executed in the last 7 days. And I want to group them by my test name. So this will show me like which tests are really, really stable, which tests are mostly stable with some failing test case, which ones are failing consistently, and which ones are flaky and I should take a look into it. And there's many ways to filter this view out. You can also do, rather than just tests, you can filter it out by project, you can filter it out by device, browser, you can filter out by tag. But by doing so, you can really build your own customized view to share with your team in the view that makes the most sense for the rest of the folks in your team, including, in this case, you can have, let's say, a product owner view where you would group all the data that's relevant for that same project. And what's powerful about this is not only can you showcase all your Cypress execution and tests in here, but within the same view, you can also consume data such as your API tests. If you have any locally executed API tests, you can also push them up to the Perfecto result as well. If you have, let's say, Selenium tests running on Perfecto or running locally, you can also push those test execution up to Perfecto and we can consume that data. And once everything is up in the cloud, in a repository, this will give you a really, basically a visualization of everything happening from backend, from, let's say, your backend unit tests, your API tests, your middle tier tests, all the way to your unit tests, your UI tests, any test execution that you have, you can consume within the same dashboard. Last but not least, we also have a report library. So what this is it lists out all the tests side by side in parallel. All right, so here you'll see there's quite a few tests running, and if I look at this on the right, we can consume tests from various different frameworks, including Selenium-based frameworks. We also have a scriptless framework, or if there's any, let's say, Cypress framework execution, native framework execution, those will all be displayed in here as well. So let's drill down into the details. We've gone through on a high level what you can cover, but if I have a test in here, let's say this over here, I can click, in this case, I'm clicking onto a build. This is build 229, but I can also see exactly why the test is passing and why the test is failing. So when I click onto the URL, and this is quite a straightforward test. It visits a website and do 2 validations. But you have the step-by-step, what we're doing on the left. And you also have on the right, in this case, is a very short video showing that your Cypress execution is running in the cloud. By having this will give you a lot more artifact that you would normally get compared to just reading your logs. So this will give you a lot more breadcrumbs when there are issues that are arising from your regression or your smoke tests. So that's kind of a really high-level summary of Perfecto and Perfecto with our Cypress framework. And really the value is getting your executions done a lot faster. And we do that by providing you a simple SDK that can run a lot more browsers in parallel. And on top of that, we noticed that once you have that up and running, the next frontier is really to solve that reporting and the framework problem. In Perfecto, out of the box, you don't have to do anything. The SDK will also upload all the results into our Perfecto reporting analytics dashboard. So we're really taking away some of the things that will slow down your development and slow down your team. And we're taking that and we're making it available as a SaaS offering. Now with that, really, once you've looked at Perfecto and you want to move forward with Perfecto, next thing really is you want to figure out is how do you get this into your team? Like how do you get your manager to say, yes, this looks good. This is something that we want to move forward with. Now this is where we can bucketize what is the value of Perfecto plus Cypress and what is the value that our SDK is bringing to you and your team. And we can do this by bucketizing it into 3 separate categories. Now in here, you'll see there's first of all, the green bubble, what this is comparing the value of doing a DIY lab and reporting framework versus consuming it as a service with Perfecto. Now the second bubble is really comparing the value of having a faster feedback loop. And the last bubble in here in light blue is really the value of developer productivity gain. So what can we do for a developer if we give you a lot more time back by having a lot faster feedbacks? And we've done case studies. We work with all our customers to define what this looks like. Here's one example. And here's one example where we're comparing the DIY costs versus maintaining, comparing the DIY costs of maintaining a report in the grid versus doing this in Perfecto. And you'll see this, we've been working with this with a customer, and what we found out is that if they have to do this on their own, now first of all, for the grid, they need to leverage another team member from the DevOps team. On top of that, for the reporting framework, along with leveraging a DevOps engineer, they also need a test automation engineer that already knows how to do custom reports and custom test execution, feeding it into data and making a visualization out of it. So you see that this quickly adds up and this becomes really, really expensive on an ongoing basis for any team. And in fact, if you look at the breakdown, majority of this is really your development time, which you have to incur on an ongoing basis in order to get this grid up and running, in order to get the report up and running and also maintainable. Now, in this case, with this customer, what we're doing is we're comparing the cost of scaling this up to 50 concurrent capacity, so 50 web browsers in parallel. And we found out that by looking at the breakdown, this is really, really expensive for them to maintain on their own. All right, so the second thing that we bucketize is really the value of faster feedback. And you see on there, here's a diagram where it shows 2 pipelines, right? So on the top is what happens without Perfecto. What happens if you're running this locally and running this sequentially? And what we found is that you think about a day-to-day of a developer, really what they're doing is they'll do development along with, let's say, all other administrative tasks. But every time that they develop and they, let's say, do a pull request, they have to wait for feedback. And typically we see that if you have an existing suite of tests, it could take up to at least 30 minutes or more. But every time that they're waiting on feedback, this is where they'll lose interest or they do something else. So really what they're doing is they're switching from one thing to another thing. And we all know that once developers are doing context switches, this will take them a little bit more time for them to refresh their memory and get back to what they were working on before. But if you add up all of this downtime within a day-to-day basis, this could really slow down your development, both because your developer are doing a lot of context switch, but also because they're waiting around for a report and waiting for feedback before they can proceed on working on the next task. So really with Perfecto, what we're trying to achieve in here is if you look at the bottom pipeline, we're trying to minimize the downtime that your developers are incurring. And if you can get that down to 5 minutes or less than 10 minutes, what we have seen is that developers are still engaged with the task. They won't have to worry about losing their train of thought, and they're able to continue on developing on their same, let's say, feature or bug fix that they're working on. Now, last but not least, when they're able to free up more of their time, what we also see is that developers will become more productive. And we do see that there is a shift by leveraging Perfecto, by leveraging the Cypress SDK, and by having faster feedback. What this allows us to do is really go through a lot of these bug fixes and items on the backlog a lot faster. And what we've seen with a lot of customers is that they've been telling us and they've been reporting back to us, they can cut down on their backlog because they're a lot more productive now. They're working on spending a lot more of their time on new features compared to bug fixes and what's on the backlog. And by doing so, what we're able to do for a lot of the customers is they can work on a lot of the new features. They can get a lot more done within a sprint cycle and ultimately push out a lot more of these capabilities to make their applications a lot more competitive. So with that, that concludes our webinar. Hopefully that gives you a quick taste of what Perfecto and our Cypress SDK can achieve. And also, I believe under the resource panel, there is that option. If you want to follow up on a deeper dive of what we can do for you, there is that option where you click in there to schedule a customized one-on-one demo. What we'll do on our side, we'll assign a dedicated Perfecto engineer to follow up on your questions and to show you a customized demo.
Great. I think we do have a couple of questions from the audience if we have a few minutes. Johnny, the first question from the audience asks, I have Cypress running locally now. How much effort does it take to connect to Perfecto?
Thanks, Shelby. Yes, I think that's a really, really great question. And the way that we designed our SDK is we want to make it very easy to connect to our platform. So typically it will take, I'd say, anywhere between half an hour to 1 hour. And really what you're doing is you're adding a few files, such as, let's say, the Perfecto config.json file. And you're also, through NPM, downloading our SDK package. And from that point onwards, all the magic happens within our config file. So you can define what you want to run on, the platform you want to run on, and also the reporting capabilities as well if you want to visualize your results. So all in all, we have this fully documented in our developers portal. And it typically takes no more than a few hours to get this up and running. Now, sometimes within an enterprise setting, we do see that some customers have additional, let's say, setup they have to go through, such as, let's say, proxies, VPNs, access to internal environment. This will add on a little bit more time, but all in all, it should be a really good straightforward setup with minimal code change. And in this case, we don't modify anything directly from your test suite. All we're doing is we're adding some config files so that we know what to do in terms of uploading your repository and the strategy of executing on multiple browsers in parallel.
Great. The next question asks, do you support TypeScript and BDD frameworks with Cypress?
Yes. So we looked at this, and part of our rollout is really we want to see what is available in the market and what are most of our customers and prospects using. And we found out that a majority of the customers are on Cypress with vanilla JavaScript, but there's also a lot of customers that are using TypeScript with Cypress, and some are also using BDD with Cypress. So we made this as part of our launch plan. So we will be supporting JavaScript, TypeScript, and BDD with Cucumber.
The last question that we have time for today is, are there any limitations on the number of parallel executions?
Yes, so with Perfecto, there really isn't any limitation. So the only limitation per se is the number of concurrent license you have in your cloud. So for example, if you have 100 license as part of your Perfecto platform, at any one time, you can run 100 parallel browsers with Cypress. And this is, again, defined and controlled within your Perfecto JSON config file. This will allow you to define on how many browsers and what's a combination of those browsers and how many of those are running in parallel.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Johnny. And if we didn't get to your question, we will reach out to you via email. So thank you to our audience for your attendance and participation today. And thank you, of course, to our presenter, Johnny Lamb. We hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Shelby.